Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here. Last day of September 2020, so Wednesday the 30th. Right, part 2 of exhausts for the Fury. But just before we get into this, as I mentioned in part 1, then one of the other aspects that we're keeping on top of at the moment is the completion of the cylinder head over at Ward's Engineering in Rugby, and I did go over there on Monday, a couple of days ago, and spent some time with Richard there to look at the status and also provide him with a now machined example of the tappet bucket. And here's a couple of pictures showing each side of the head. The valve seats are in and machined, all lined up. The valve guides are in, and he's just got to machine now the cavities for the springs and buckets, and then that's it, job done. I'll be able to bring it back, and we might have it back in a couple of weeks or so, 2 or 3 weeks, job done. So here's a couple of pictures of the cylinder head as of a couple of days ago. Right, back onto the exhaust then. So where we left this first silencer that we're fabricating is that we've taken the end off it, which is that ring there, and also a baffle mounting ring. We'd put the baffle back into it, and we've determined that that cone off the other silencer will push in there nicely as a flush fit, and then we're ultimately going to put a seam of weld all around here once we've tidied that flare up a bit. And also we'll grind off the chrome plate first, because these are going to be obviously refinished once they've been fabricated. So we can now think about, before we get onto a ton of welding, now think about the other end. So I've been doing a bit of measuring up, as you can see by the black marks, just about, hopefully 3 of them. And the reason for that is that now we've got the measurement on this silencer with the cone on the end. It's about 1.5 inches too long, because what we're trying to do here is replicate the system that's on the Bandit over here, which is an ex-factory prototype, we think, from when this experimental motor was going through the mill, but it's not quite as per the final design, but it's close enough, so we're going to replicate that. And so, because they're the silencer end, they're 23 inches long from the end of the cone to the clamp, end of the clamp onto the pipe. Then we've got the ones that we're fabricating, we've got to shorten them by 1.5 inches, but also we've got to also put this taper, this additional taper in it, cone if you like, a steeper curved cone down to a smaller bore on the pipe. So we're just measuring up for that. Now the first consideration is, well, firstly we've got to take the extra meat off this end. So the plan is that firstly I'm going to cut a piece off that will slot, and then we'll compress effectively for the right diameter to wrap around the smaller pipes than this was designed for. Then we're going to take 1.5 inches off, and then we're going to take the 3 inches or so off, that again we'll have to reduce down at one end to increase the taper down to what will be that pipe, and that will then give us firstly the right length, but secondly the right diameter at this end too, and also it'll replicate the Bandit silencer in that we'll have a separate section here with a steeper taper. Now the consideration though when measuring up like this is, hang on a minute, we've got the baffle in here and that's quite a long baffle, so where does that end up? Well, we're okay actually, because if we measure up how far in that is, it's about 6 3/4 inches. So on the top side here you can see we're about 1 inch inside of that, on the right side of that, with respect to that cut there. So the first thing to do here then is make 3 cuts through this. 1, 2, 3, and that part that comes out will be discarded. This will be tapered down, that will be reduced in diameter and tacked on, and so we'll end up with a pipe probably about that long to there. So first things first, we'll get cutting through this lot, and I'll bring you back once we've done that. Right, there we go. 15 minutes later. Not too bad a job at all, actually, with a sharp hacksaw blade and making sure the hacksaw is used properly. It's a two-handed tool, the old hacksaw there. It's done a great job. So I'm pleased with that. So that's the part we're going to discard. We'll now cut a bigger slot in that. We need to actually measure the diameter first of that, and then the diameter of one of the pipes. And incidentally, you'll notice that I've got the clamping ring on the pipes, and that's because you will see there's a little bit of a scar there, but I carefully cut some slots into the wells. Sorry, it's not focusing very well. Cut some slots into the wells that were holding that nut on there, which was incorrectly specified by me to hold the exhaust guards, and it's totally the wrong way of doing it. But anyway, managed to cut some slots in the weld and knock the nut off, and just put a dab of high temperature gloss paint on there, and so I've managed to save the black chrome. So yeah, there's a little bit of a scar there, but that is going to be the position where these rings clamp on. And the way that I prepare these is that one hole is drilled on this side. You slot it onto the pipe, and then you put a nut behind the hole, and on the outer side you put what will be on the pipe the small end of the guard. On top of that, then you put a screw through there that goes all the way through the nut, and then clamps the ring onto the pipe, and that clamping screw will should end up in the centre of that scar there. So if I just show you what happens. So basically this ring will be on here, there'll be a hole drilled there, nut on the back side of it, screw all the way in to hold the guard on the outside, and then the screw's long enough to go all the way through the nut, clamping nut, and to then tighten up against the or protrude up against the pipe, so it holds this ring taut against the pipe. There we go. So what we need to do then is, you can see we're a million miles away there, so it's going to need a good chunk cutting out of it. It's already got some slots which obviously we'll retain, so we'll aim to cut either side of one of the slots and pull the two together. And I would say we're going to need, well, let's have a look. Difficult to tell there, but it must be probably nearly 50% wider diameter. So, but I don't know what the diameter is of the pipe, so I can do pi d, but if I don't know the reference size, then I can't work out what we need to take off. So I'll have to do a bit of measuring up. But you can see we've got quite a bit to take off and to close that ring down. But anyway, we'll do a bit of measuring up now, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so the OD of this pipe is 1 1/4 inches, 1.25. So times pi is 3.92 inches outer circumference. And looking at that, you wouldn't have thought so, but actually I've checked it by the piece of string technique, and it is. So that's correct. So then, with respect to this, the inside diameter of this is 1.8 inches. So give me a second, I'll come back once I've calculated what circumference on the inside surface that is. So the circumference on the inner surface of that is 5.65 inches. So we're looking to chop out of this about 1.6 inches. So we'll get measuring up and see what we're talking about. Right, so we need to hack out in between the waist, not the waist side, the retained side of each of those black marks. So quite a big chunk. Right, so we'll get on with that. I'll probably go down the marks first, because it's always best to go slightly under, because obviously those are not that accurate. They're about 1.6 inches apart, centre to centre of those black marks, but we'll go on the safe side of each of those, and we can always grind a bit more off as we need it. Right, there we go as a starter for 10. So that's the chunk that I've taken out, and I've just very basically formed that. You can see it's not quite round, but it just needs a bit of shaping. But checking that new diameter against the pipe, I'll go on that way round, then it's not bad, but there's still a bit of play there. So I'm going to take at some point a little bit more off, but we're on our way there anyway. So next thing to attack then is this, and we now know that we're going from the original diameter on the left and then tapering this down further to the diameter of this piece, which we want at 3.92 on the inner side. So we need to do a similar thing then, measure this up and see how much we need to take off this end, and then what we'll have to do with this, because we want to retain the diameter at the exhaust end, then we'll need to cut a V, a tape out of this, and form it down at that end, so we'll end up with a steeper tapered cone. So back to the formula and the calculator. Right, before finishing measuring up on the taper, I've just taken another sliver off this just to close down that inner diameter. So that's now a snug fit on the pipe. As I say, it needs a bit more forming to make it symmetrical, but that's a snug fit. So I've now taken the OD dimension off that and applied it to the part that we want to increase the cone, the gradient of the cone, and we need to actually reduce it by 1 3/4 inches on the pipe side. So as you can see, I've marked up a V on that. So we'll then do one cut that way, and there's, oh, it's not very clear actually, but there is another mark along there. You can just about see it. So I'll do a couple of cuts in that, and then we need to try and form it so we can then close that end up, which will hopefully then make it the same OD as that, and then we're ready to tack the first one together. So let's get cutting this and see what we end up with. I don't know what I'm going to form it with yet, but anyway, we'll get the cuts made first and see how we get on. Right, there we go. So what I've done now, I've cut it, just to be sure, is check the OD of that against that length there, and it is correct, so my measurements were right. That's good news. So now I've just got to think about the best way of trying to compress that down while keeping the other end rigid, so that we get, you know, a pretty uniform cone from that without knocking it about too much. I'm thinking of using a small ratchet strap or something like that. Actually, I've got a strap wrench, I think. That might do it. And the other thing I'm thinking of is, now I've cut that, then we might tack that back on there to give that some rigidity at the base, so we can then attack this. And some of you might say, well, why actually did you cut that off? And the reason is because on the originals, well, the ones that we have anyway, there is a seam here, so we wanted to replicate that. And actually, I suppose we could have just put a weld seam around it, but then it would have been much more difficult, really, I think, to be able to measure this up and fabricate that if all this lot was still on it, to be honest. But yeah, just to remind you, there it is. There's a seam there, so we want to try and replicate a symmetrical taper down to that seam there. There's quite a bit of an overlap actually on that seam, so we don't have to go all the way down, but that's what we're doing anyway. Right, so let's have a think then about what we can use. But I think the next step might be to get the welder out, and we've got this silencer body which is now scrap that we took the cone from, and we can use that, grind the chrome off that, and use that as a bit of a test bed, and then we'll do a bit of grinding on our components and begin maybe knitting a few bits and pieces together, and especially at this end to stabilise the base, and then we can attack that to compress it down as evenly as possible. Right, we'll take it from there. Right everyone, next evening, and I've been giving this a bit of thought, and good news and more challenging news probably. So I was firstly, after the session in the garage last night, I was thinking about how to compress this down into more of a tapered cone, and I searched around a bit on YouTube for any inspiration and came across a really useful video on the same subject where what they did was use hose clips or Jubilee clips of different sizes and basically gradually clamp them down on this shape to close that up, which I think will work. And I've already tried to to a similar extent on the end, what will be the end piece, and it seems to work quite well, and it confirms as well that it is a snug fit on the end of the pipe. Now the other consideration though is that the way that I've cut this probably means that I'm going to end up with a taper on one side, you know, a more of an angled taper on one side, on this side, than that. In other words, this end here, without a bit of beating around, probably isn't going to be central. But that might be okay, because when ultimately two of these will be together, one on top of the other, then there's going to need to be a certain gap here to mimic the gap of the pipes which run parallel down the side of the motor to the silencers. So we might be okay even if this isn't quite central, because obviously we can position this any way we want now on the end of that, such that when it's fitted to the bike, using that bracket obviously on the inner side, we can ensure that the taper's in such a position whereby the more acute taper is either on the top or the bottom, to ensure that the pipes are the correct distance apart to maintain that parallel run down the side of the motor. Otherwise it's not going to look very clever. So what we'll do first is, I've got several sizes here that are all going to fit over this at various lengths, and we'll put them on there, and we'll begin to tighten that up and see what sort of shape we attain. Right, this is going to work. So sorry I didn't film it, but what I did initially was I put a Jubilee clip of the right side on the inside of this end, so this didn't compress, because this was just about touching at that end anyway, because it was its original diameter. And then I put a couple of Jubilee clamps, one in the centre and one at the top here, and gradually drew it in. And in fact I can just about push that together now with my hand, so we can tack that. The other consideration then is, as we thought, then obviously, you know, that leaves us with a taper, a larger taper on one side. However, what we can do is, once we've tacked this, is we can trim up the ends. We'll lose a little bit of length, but I'm not too worried about that. Trim up the ends to sort of equalise it. So basically, if we look at that, trim off sort of there and there. Yeah, that's right. So it sort of changes the position of it slightly, and changes the perspective of that face against the taper, so we can centralise it. So I think that's going to work. So what we'll end up with then is, let's give me a minute, and I'm going to lay this out as it would be as an exhaust, and then we can wrap up this as a part before then tomorrow night and over the weekend. Where are we now? 15th of October today.
Friday tomorrow. Going to contact Wards at Rugby tomorrow to see if the Fury SS cylinder head is ready. But then that means at the weekend we can begin to attack this with the welder. So let me just set it up how I think it's going to be, and I'll bring you back. Right, there we are, a quick mock-up. So that'll be the bottom pipe from the right-hand cylinder. Is that right? Yeah, the bottom pipe from the right-hand cylinder. So the pipe, remember the cylinders are canted, which is why that union's on the slope. Comes around into the silencer, taper out, then into the main mega, and the guard then sort of fits roughly like so. And of course with a cone on the end. So that's it, taking shape. And for the next video I will drag the Bandit out so we can get a better comparison. It's a bit squeezed in there between the Lightning and the Show Fury. But yeah, pretty pleased with that. And I've done a quick measure up from tip to bend, and it's about 44-45 inches, and that's the same as the system on the Bandit, give or take. So got a bit of tidying up to do, as I say, on that cone to give it a bit more symmetry, but there we are. Right, we'll leave it there then. That's long enough rambling on, and we'll leave it there as part 2. And in the next part then we'll get on with tacking this together and tidying things up a bit. And then of course once we've done that, we've got the other one to do as well. So we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Thanks for all your interest, comments, and any subscriptions. It's very much appreciated. And hopefully we'll get on with some practice welding and tacking up this weekend. I'll film all of that as well, and as I say, we'll use that, what is now a scrap silencer, clean the chrome off it, and do a bit of practicing on that, and look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much, everybody. See you again soon. Cheers. Bye bye.